I am Pastor Juan, and it is with great pleasure that I am here to share an experience that changed my life. I sincerely hope that my story can bring something positive to all of you. I want to start by saying that between the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, a disease emerged that quickly spread throughout the world, COVID-19. At that time, I heard rumors that the virus had originated in China and, shortly thereafter, reached the United States and many other countries, including Mexico. To be honest, I didn't really believe it. I thought it was all just a fabrication or an exaggerated conspiracy theory. However, this disbelief ended up costing me dearly. I know many churches and have several friends and family who are pastors and religious leaders, some with great responsibilities in their congregation. However, until that moment, I didn't know anyone from these communities who had been infected. This only made me question the veracity of the pandemic even more. It seemed to me that this was a plot created by some government. Meanwhile, people continued to wear masks on the streets. But to be honest, I didn't care about the situation. Some people wore masks, others didn't. And I went on with my life without believing that the pandemic was something really serious. Everything changed at the beginning of July 2020. I started to feel unwell, but initially, the symptoms seemed like just a common flu, body aches, headache, and a little fever. As I didn't think it was anything serious, I decided to go to the doctor. The doctor did some routine tests, checked my heart rate and lungs. After a few minutes, she looked at me and asked, "How long have you been like?" I replied that it had been about 3 days. She then wrote down everything in the prescription, looked at me and said, "Juan, what you have is dengue fever." I was a little surprised because at home we use mosquito nets and I had never seen a mosquito. Even so, I accepted the diagnosis and followed her instructions, purchasing the recommended medication. At first, I didn't pay much attention to the situation. After all, dengue is something that usually passes quickly. However, the next day, my symptoms started to get worse, and as the days went by, they only got more intense. I took the medications as prescribed, in addition to other medications I used to take, but nothing seemed to help. At that moment, it never crossed my mind that it could be COVID-19. I didn't really consider that possibility. As I remained at home, I began to feel increasingly weak. I could no longer stand up and was forced to lie down all the time. One of my daughters was with me, and she called another daughter who lives in the United States. They were probably already suspicious that something wasn't right, but at the time, no one knew for sure what was going on. That night, around 11:30 p.m., the situation worsened. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. I tried to breathe in, but it seemed like it wasn't enough. It was as if something was squeezing my chest and preventing me from breathing. Desperate, I called my son. "I can't breathe." Immediately, my son Isaac got up and called one of my daughters. They rushed to help me and took me to the car, heading to a nearby hospital. We got there around 1 a.m. I was met by doctors who immediately diagnosed COVID-19. However, the hospital did not have the infrastructure to treat serious cases of the disease, so they informed me that I would need to be transferred. I clearly remember getting out of the car, being placed on an encapsulated stretcher, and then I lost consciousness. The last memory I have is being taken into the hospital. When I regained consciousness, 14 days had already passed. He had no idea how he got there, nor did he know he had been transferred to another hospital. I only discovered all this later, when my daughters told me what happened. What followed this experience was a difficult journey, but full of learning and reflection. Today, looking back, I see how my own resistance to believing in what was happening around me led me down a path of suffering. This taught me the importance of not underestimating life's challenges and of always being open to learning and growing, even in the most difficult situation. When I opened my eyes, I saw a nurse about 2 meters away from me. She immediately shouted, "Doctor! Doctor! He's awake!" Shortly afterwards, the doctor appeared in the hallway and came to my bed. He asked me, "How are you feeling, Mr. Juan?" I was stunned, unable to fully understand what was happening. I couldn't respond as I wanted. I just made gestures and whispered because my voice couldn't come out and my body was without strength. The doctor then began to explain to me, "You have been here for 14 days. Your family brought you to the hospital in critical condition. When you arrived, your lungs were completely collapsed. After the assessment, we found that you arrived with only 5% of life. These words shocked me deeply. The doctor continued. His body was still warm, but the situation was very serious. We had to act urgently, and we asked his daughters for permission. We explained to them that his condition was critical. He told me that, when he was admitted to the hospital, the doctors had warned my daughters that I was on the verge of death. Without intubation, my life would have only lasted another hour or two before I went into respiratory arrest. My lungs were so damaged that there was no room for oxygen to circulate. The most surprising thing, however, was that before I got sick, I had already talked to my daughters about this type of situation. I asked them that, if I were affected by the disease, they would not allow me to be intubated. I had heard so many stories of patients who did not survive after intubation that I made this decision. This request, however, put my daughters in a terrible situation. On one hand, there was my desire not to be intubated, but on the other, the doctor warned that without the procedure, my life would be at imminent risk. It was my eldest daughter, Mireia, who made the decision to allow intubation. I learned this later, when my daughters Bianca and Mireia, together with my son Isaac, told me everything. They were all there at the hospital when the doctor broke the news. Despite the pain and shock, my children tried to remain calm. It was then that, in front of everyone, Mireia shouted, "Kneel down, Bianca, kneel down. Let's ask God for our lives." She couldn't accept that I, someone who had never believed in anything like that, was about to die from something I never believed. In front of everyone, she knelt down and began to cry out to God for mercy. That's what my children did for me. Now, I want to go back in time a little, to the moment when I regained consciousness in the hospital. I want to tell everyone who listens to me that this is not a game, it is not a joke. What I'm sharing here is something very serious. I would never make up a lie about something so important, because I don't want to compromise my salvation. Therefore, I speak with an open heart about this experience. Before I opened my eyes and returned to reality, the doctor had told me, "You've been here for 14 days. You've been intubated, and you'll still need to spend a few more days in the hospital to recover completely." In total, I was hospitalized for 20 days. But the experience I had while I was unconscious was something I never imagined going through. I had never experienced something so profound, something that, when I look back, I understand very clearly. While he was unconscious, he was no longer on earth. What I experienced was not a simple dream, like those in which we see familiar people or places. No, I was in a completely unfamiliar place, something I had never experienced before. Maybe something that resembles scenes from science fiction films, but nothing that I had actually experienced. I felt like I was floating in space. I could see everything around me and was fully aware of what was happening. Around me, I saw countless stars of different colors. It was dark, but starlight twinkled in the distance in a surreal setting. I was surprised and asked myself, "What is this?" I couldn't see the ground. I didn't know if I was standing or lying down, as I was just floating. Suddenly, a large wall appeared before me. It felt like I had been taken to her, or that she was approaching me. It was a gigantic wooden wall, something so immense that I couldn't comprehend it. What was happening? I couldn't say, but the feeling of being in a place so unusual and far from reality was indescribable. I was standing in front of that huge wall, looking up, trying to understand what was happening. I couldn't see the end of it. I looked around and didn't see where it ended either. That place seemed infinite. Right in the center of the wall, there was a large wooden gate, and in it, a small window, exactly at the height of my head. I stood there, observing the unfamiliar scenery, not knowing what to think. I asked myself, "What is this? Where am I?" It was then that something happened, something I will never forget. I was there, standing in front of that window, when a voice, strong and imposing, echoed around me, as if it were coming from all sides at once. I had never experienced anything like this. The voice said only one thing: "Look inside." The instant the words were spoken, the small window opened. I, almost without thinking, took a step forward and approached, placing my face very close to the opening. What I saw was not close to me, but far away. as if I were observing something through an airplane window. I looked inside, and what I saw was indescribable. In the distance, I could make out a magnificent, dazzling city. It stretched across the entire landscape, with a river meandering through the land. The water was crystal clear, blue, and around it, many trees formed an impressive scenery. On the horizon, the city seemed to stretch infinitely. It was at that moment that I heard the same voice again. "One day, you will be here." The voice continued, naming names and saying, "Just as the Apostle Paul is here, just as my servant Moses is here, one day you too will be here." At that moment, everything became clear in my mind. I realized who was talking to me. It was God. He told me that one day I too would be in that place, just like all his children. Soon after, he gave me a mission that, to this day, worries me deep. It's not easy, but I need to stick to it, because that's the reason I came back. God sent me back, saying I had work to do. This work is still not completely clear to me, but as far as I understand, I continue to do what I have always done over the last 40 years. The mission he entrusted to me was clear. You will return to your homeland, preach to my people, and tell them that I am giving them one more opportunity. He continued, explaining, "These have always been a rebellious and idolatrous people, but you will go in my name and tell them that this is the last chance I give them." Then he added something that left me deeply uneasy. "If anyone dares to contradict what you say, which is my word, you will see with your own eyes how they will fall dead." Those words stuck in my mind. Now, with my consciousness restored, I ask myself, "Lord, what mission is this? How am I going to accomplish it?" At that moment, before God, I just bowed my head and said, "Yes, Lord, whatever the Lord commands, I will do." But now, back in the real world, those words make me cringe. How will I accomplish this mission? Honestly, I still don't know. I have no idea how I will do this, but I know I need to comply. What worries me the most is this statement from God. "You will see with your own eyes how those who oppose my word will fall with a strike." I don't want that to happen, but I know it's not up to me. This depends exclusively on God. My role is to obey and carry out what I have been ordered to do. Before finishing, he told me something that stuck in my mind, words that I still reflect on their meaning to this day. He said, "What do you lack?" And it left me with this question, so that everyone listening to this testimony may reflect on what this means. I already understood what he meant. He also said, "You lack wheels, you lack wings. Just ask." I believe that wheels can mean cars and wings can mean plane. What God meant is that I need to go to this place, fulfill this mission. This worries me deeply. I know that the mission he gave me is great, and I need to fulfill it. If God allowed me to stay alive, it was for a greater purpose. That purpose is now before me, and although I don't know exactly how it will unfold, I know it is something I cannot ignore. God gave me a second chance, and the mission he entrusted to me is the reason I am here. I know my little congregation is doing well, but I also understand that, according to Scripture, the Good Shepherd leaves the 99 sheep to seek out the one that is lost. This does not mean abandoning those who are already on the right path, but rather going after those who are still far away, still searching for something. God has entrusted me with the mission of searching for my people, and as I reflect on this, I know it will be a great challenge. I know the reality of the place where I was called. I know the dangers, the resistance of the people, and I also know that, like the Jews, many still do not accept Christ. And then I ask myself, Lord, am I being sent there just to meet the end? I know how things are there, and that thought worries me. However, if the Lord sent me, I will go. The Apostle Paul also said, "I know what awaits me. I know that I will face tribulation, but necessity is imposed on me. Woe is me if I do not preach the gospel." He also said that he considered nothing more precious in his life, that everything was like dung, because what really mattered to him was fulfilling his mission and preaching the gospel until the end. And I can say the same. I don't compare myself to the Apostle Paul, not even remotely, in relation to this great man of God. I am a very small servant, but the gospel that Paul preached is the same one we preach today. We serve the same God, and the Christ that Paul announced is the same one we humbly serve, even though we are much inferior to these great biblical men. However, the message of the gospel remains the same, and we must fulfill it. We must go and preach. This experience I had has similarities with what happened to the Apostle Paul in the Bible. Paul speaks of a man who was caught up to the third heaven and saw things that, according to him, are not allowed to be expressed. I humbly lived an experience that, although not the same as Paul's, had similarity. I never considered myself an important person, but if God granted me this privilege, who am I to question it? I have preached the gospel many times in church, but when I reflect on everything I have experienced, I thank God, even for having contracted the disease. I know this may seem strange, and I don't want anyone to be offended, because I know that many people have left, and it has caused a lot of pain in many families. But personally, I thank God. Satan may have thought that by allowing me to get sick, he would end my life, but he was wrong. It is God who gives and who takes life, and he chose to give me back my life. If Satan thought he would emerge victorious, he was frustrated. So I'm thankful even for COVID. Through this illness, I had the opportunity to live this experience. Instead of feeling discouraged or regretting, I say, "Thank you, Lord, because I could hear your voice and see, even from afar, the beauty of the place where we are going." It was like that with Moses. He saw Canaan in the distance, but could not enter. However, God told me that one day I will be there. He spoke clearly. Just as my servant Moses is here, just as Paul is here, one day you too will be here. But for now, you must go back and finish the work I have for you. And here I am, seeking God's direction to fulfill the mission He entrusted to me. I want to add something important. After being admitted to the hospital from July 14th to August 2nd, 2020, I was finally discharged and went home. However, my recovery was not simple. As part of the treatment, a pulmonologist came to my home to monitor my recovery, and he made 3 home visits. On the penultimate visit, he left me quite worried. He performed the exams, connected his devices, and the 58-inch television screen reflected the image of my chest. The doctor, with a serious expression, said, "Don Juan, your lungs are damaged, but don't worry, you will recover. It will take about 8 months, but with the right treatment, you will be able to improve. I will prescribe some medicines and devices for breathing exercises. Do this correctly, and in time, you will be well again." But when he mentioned that recovery would take 6 to 8 months, it made me uneasy. That night, as I slept, I heard again the same voice that spoke to me during the time I was unconscious in the hospital. But this time, the voice came to my house. She asked me a question that surprised me deeply. "What do you lack? Do you want a new heart? Do you want new lungs?" This shocked me, especially because, according to the pulmonologist, my lungs were quite compromised. Then, with an anguished heart, I responded in thought, "Lord, if you sent me on this mission, how can I speak with damaged lungs?" The days passed, and about 3 or 4 days later, the pulmonologist, Dr. Ricardo Garza, returned to carry out a new evaluation. He hooked up his equipment to examine my lungs, and when the image appeared on the TV screen, he was visibly surprised. He looked at the devices, then at me with a look of disbelief. He exclaimed, "This can't be." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean, doctor?" He kept looking at the screen and at me, repeating, "This can't be." Then he turned to me and said, "Don Juan, the damage your lungs had is gone. Your lungs are clean." I was silent for a moment, reflecting on those words. Then I began to understand what had really happened. God had already worked. He had restored my lung. Surprised, I asked the doctor, "Doctor, you know what you are doing, don't you?" He replied confidently, "Yes, of course. I am an expert." So I asked, "How long have you been practicing your profession?" He replied, "I'm 43 years old." I then looked at him and said, "Doctor, I believe in what you are saying, but tell me, how do you explain what happened to my lungs? You yourself said that it would take me 6 to 8 months to recover completely. Now, how do you explain such a quick recovery?" The doctor became serious and, with a thoughtful look, said he didn't know what had happened. At that moment, I asked my children to take my cell phone and put a video on the TV for the doctor to watch. They put on my sermon, So I told the doctor, "Doctor, this is my job. This is what I've been doing for years." The doctor looked at the screen and asked, "Are you a Bible lecturer?" "Yes, doctor, that's my job, and I need my lungs to do that job." So I continued, "Doctor, I believe in what you say, but know that what I'm telling you also has a biblical foundation. Before you were even born, I was already preaching the word. I've been doing this for over 44 years, and you're 43 years old." The doctor listened to me in silence, and when I finished speaking, I saw his eyes begin to fill with tears. He then said to me, "Don Juan, on the day you are going to witness this publicly, please let me know. I want to be there." I was touched by your words, and so, with a grateful heart, I moved on. Sometime later, I was invited to give my testimony in a church. I had already shared this story on another platform, but now I was invited to speak at a church in the Cercado region, near Monterrey. During my visit to the church, while I was busy, I didn't notice that my cell phone was ringing. Only when I got home, after finishing work, did I check my WhatsApp message. To my surprise, there were several unanswered messages and calls from Dr. Ricardo Garza. I knew something special had happened, but at that moment, realizing the gravity and depth of that experience, I felt like my mission was just beginning. It was an ordinary night when I received a message that, without knowing it, would change everything for me. The impact was immediate and profound, touching my heart in a way I never imagined. I shared my experience with a doctor, detailing each moment, and I saw an emotion in his eyes that could not be disguised. I felt that, in some way, the Word of God touched his heart, and this made me reflect deeply. However, what really left me speechless was the message I received at 10:43 p.m. When I saw the name Mari Jose, Dr. Ricardo's wife, my world seemed to stop. She explained to me, with regret, that her husband, a young pulmonologist, just 43 years old, had died in December of the previous year, a victim of COVID-19. He was a dedicated doctor, with 12 years of training, and until his death, he continued to see patients, with the usual routine of someone who did not know that his life would be interrupted so quickly. I was shaken to learn that he, the one I had known as a symbol of competence and care, was gone. And I asked myself, where does destiny take us? Could it have been me who had infected him? These questions haunted my mind. Amid the pain of losing the doctor, Mari Jose also shared the pain of her own loss. Her brother, whom she had said goodbye to just a few days before the doctor's death. The date of her departure was August 2nd, and she, who was recovering in the hospital, left that place on the 10th after a period of anguish. The pain was overwhelming, but what moved me most was realizing that so many lives are intertwined in moments of tragedy, as if destiny was reminding us of the fragility of our existence. This is not a simple report. It is a call to reflection. The pain and loss this family faced are not just isolated stories. They talk about something much bigger. By sharing this experience with everyone, Mari Jose made me think about life, purpose, and how much God, in His infinite wisdom, has a plan for each of us. She highlighted that we have a living God, the only true owner of life, and that He gives us opportunities every day. But the question that echoes is, until when will we postpone our decision to follow Him? Do we need to go through extreme situations to finally realize that He calls us? This testimony touched me in a profound way, and I believe it has the power to touch everyone who reads it. The question that remains is, what will you do with this message? Are you going to ignore it and move on as if nothing had changed? Or are you going to reflect on your life and understand that the time to make a decision is now? How many more opportunities will you let pass by? God speaks every day, but are we listening? Are we ready to obey His voice? I would like to know, what about this testimony most impacted your life? What did God speak to your heart? Let's interact, share, and strengthen our faith together. If you want to continue being edified and receiving more messages like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Don't leave until tomorrow what God has to say to you today. He has something to say, and you can't miss it. May God bless you immensely.